All right, man, peace. So one of the long-running narratives of the NBA regular season was, when will Kawhi Leonard be returning to the San Antonio Spurs? It spilled over past the All-Star break, and I even made a video pertaining to the issue in which I stated that I believe that he would come back near the end of the regular season into the playoffs to try to justify the contract restructuring that he was going to be looking for, meaning the extension in which he would get the Supermax. But it's very obvious to me that he was offended by the Spurs' attempt at a quote-unquote intervention, and he's decided to cut all ties with the organization. Because what he's done is pretty much told the entire San Antonio Spurs franchise that he doesn't give a shit about what happens with them from here on out. And do I blame him? No, not really. Because I believe that he's been the victim of propaganda for the majority of the... And do I blame him? No, not really. Because I believe that he's been the victim of a program of propaganda that has started from the very quote-unquote top, meaning Mr. Greg Popovich, all the way on down. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Warriors up 2-0. The Spurs are struggling without Kawhi Leonard. Max, with all this uncertainty regarding Kawhi, should they want him to return?
No, I agree with Max Kellerman. No, the San Antonio Spurs should not want Kawhi Leonard back, and he should not want them back either. This is the perfect example of two people who seem like they made the perfect couple, and they both mutually decided to go their separate ways for appropriate reasons. Kawhi Leonard no longer wants to conform to that cult-like mentality, that cult atmosphere that starts from the MK handler known as Greg Popovich. And the San Antonio Spurs understand that he's not someone who's going to allow himself to be manipulated any longer. So the fit is just not right. It's like if you're a laid-back dude and you're with a high-strung chick. One of you guys has to change your personality, or the both of you have to agree to meet in the middle. And if there's no agreement there, if there's no mutual respect there, then you guys might as well not be together.
No. They should want Kawhi gone because Kawhi, it seems, or the people around him, his uncle, whoever it is, doesn't want to be there is what it seems. The relationship...
Don't blame Kawhi's uncle. Kawhi's uncle works for him. Kawhi's uncle works for him. Let's give Kawhi Leonard more credit than that. I believe that he would not allow his uncle to manipulate him on that level. There's too much on the line. I think that Kawhi Leonard for a while has been thinking about his situation with the San Antonio Spurs, and he's decided that it's just not the right fit for him, that he'd rather go somewhere else. I believe that he's someone who is quote-unquote breaking the programming. He wants to be his own man. He wants to have his own franchise. He does not want to be just another cog in the Spurs machine. And we've seen how the Spurs have reacted to his rebellion. That is by trying to engage him in a media war. And to his credit, he has not conformed. He has not decided to go back and forth and get chippy. He has not allowed the propaganda to wear him down. So good for him.
Relationship seems fractured to me, Stephen A. And I don't mean that because Kawhi thinks he's hurt maybe and they don't. Because I'll side with the player on that. The player knows his body better than anybody else. And Kawhi is smart and strong to not succumb to peer pressure.
I agree with that. He's shown a great deal of resolve. So good for him. I think that he fits in well on quite a few teams. Kawhi will pretty much fit in well anywhere because he's not a ball-dominant player. He's extremely proficient on offense. And he's the best player at his position on defense in the entire NBA.
And professional pressure. Ginobili, Parker, not to mention his head coach and GM of the team or team president.
Yeah, when they declared the code red on him. Right? Colonel Jessup declared the code red on Kawhi.
And Popovich saying, I don't care how much pressure there is you're putting on me, I'm not right yet. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that I see Popovich having to send messages to Kawhi through the media.
No, Popovich does not have to send messages to Kawhi through the media. The way that we know that is that the last time that we heard from Kawhi directly, when he was dealing with the media, when they were surrounding him and he was at the practice facility, he explicitly stated that there is open communication between him and the Spurs. We know that that includes Greg Popovich. Greg Popovich has decided to communicate with Kawhi through the media because he was trying to utilize the media to put pressure on Kawhi Leonard. It did not work, and it will not work. And that is why Kawhi deserves a lot of credit, because the media is nothing but an intermediary. That's where the word media comes from. When you act as a medium, it basically means that it's your job to ferry information from one party to another. That's it. You're a middleman, right? Medium, middleman. That's it. Once again, kudos to Kawhi for not conforming to the bullshit.
Yeah. You know, when he says things like, hey, if he's not back by a certain point, he doesn't come back, we need to be able to integrate him into the team and all that stuff. You just can't walk in off the street and start playing, essentially, is what Popovich was saying. This is toward the end of the regular season, or the last third of the regular season. What that tells me is Popovich is trying to talk to Kawhi through the media. So Stephen A., that tells me he doesn't feel like he can just get in touch with Kawhi and talk to him directly.
No. What that really means is that Popovich does not feel like direct interaction and communication with Kawhi is getting the message into Kawhi's head that he wants to be embedded in there. And you'll oftentimes see people do that. Like, you ever be in close contact or close vicinity with someone who knows that you don't fuck with them, and they know that if it was just you and them there, they would not even try to talk to you. But if you're in a party, say a job party or an engagement where there's a crowd of people there, they'll suddenly try to speak to you because they think that you're going to conform to the social norms that will stipulate that if they say hello to you, that you're going to say hello back. If they try to communicate with you, you're going to communicate back with them because you don't want to look brusque, rude, or obstinate in front of a crowd. People will oftentimes do that. They'll utilize different tactics to try to get a certain energy from a person that they know that they cannot get in direct contact. They'll utilize that sense of social mores or social normalities to try to get you to conform. They think that they can bully you by making you bow down to a sense of propriety in front of a crowd. And I think that is truly what has frustrated Popovich. It's like, wow, I cannot reach this guy. None of my tricks are working with this dude no matter what I do.
And if he can, maybe the message won't be received. That tells me there's enough of a fractured relationship there that they're better off apart. Now, let me say this. I'm not even going to dwell on the package they can get in return. Because as we know in the NBA, you don't break up $1 for 4 quarters. We just saw that with the Cavs. They broke up Kyrie into maybe a 50-cent piece, and Isaiah Thomas in a couple of quarters didn't work. You give up.
I wouldn't even call Isaiah Thomas a 50-cent piece. He was more like a dime.
You give up $1, you need $1 back. I'll bet you there is a real special talent you can get for Kawhi, or at least a draft pick package. But more than that, here's what's significant. We saw what Daryl Morey did with the Rockets. In order to compete really for a championship, you need a special 5-star type player. Problem is, no one was available. So what did Daryl Morey do? He identified a guy who could be in James Harden. No one perceived Harden that way at the time.
That's not true. Coming off of the 2012 NBA Finals, pretty much every GM in the NBA was spotlighting James Harden as a potential superstar who was basically being hidden behind Westbrook and Kevin Durant. He was pretty much viewed as by far the most dynamic sixth man in the NBA and a player who could be a star if given the opportunity on another team. So no, that's not true. Everyone saw James Harden's potential. No one was surprised when he went to Houston and instantly became a 24, 25 point per game guy.
He grabbed them and brought it out of him too, including with D'Antoni. He was good before D'Antoni, but here's an undervalued asset. We're going to identify it, acquire it, and develop it. Popovich, if Daryl Morey could do that with D'Antoni, Popovich, who's done it time and again late in the draft, including with Kawhi Leonard, can do that better than anyone. So I say goodbye to Kawhi, get what you can, Popovich will rebuild.
Stephen A., can I say one thing real quick, because I took issue with what he said? The fact that he can only communicate with him through the media, it's 2018. He doesn't need to speak to Kawhi through the media. He could find another way to reach him.
I completely agree with you, Molly, but let me say this. If you have an issue with what Max Kellerman stated, you should wait until the end of the debate. You're not one of the debaters. You're a moderator. And you know who I blame for this? I blame Stephen A. Smith. Unfortunately, and not to go there, but this is directly reflective of the so-called black man's inability and oftentimes reticence to establish a sense of propriety, a sense of standards and protocol for the females that work under him. At the end of the day, Molly Qerim works under Stephen A. Smith. He's supposed to establish to her and let her know what the overall protocol is in debate. She's not supposed to chime in or give her take or her perspective on anything until the end of the debate. That's it. Who cares about what she feels about what Max Kellerman stated, even though I agree with her? It's very clear that the reason why Popovich decided to utilize the tactic that he did is because he wanted to make sure that Kawhi Leonard felt the pressure of the media. And unfortunately for Popovich, it did not work. But once again, Stephen A. Smith, and that's the difference between Stephen A. and Skip Bayless. Skip Bayless does not allow that nonsense with Joy Taylor on Undisputed. She doesn't speak until he gives her permission to speak, and that's at the end of the debate. But that's also reflective of many modern liberal black men and the fact that they accept the notion that they're underneath a woman. Stephen A. Smith is still scared of the power of the feminine principle ever since Michelle Beadle got his ass suspended a couple of years ago over the Ray Rice incident and his statements. So he's probably frightened that Molly Qerim may go to the management at ESPN if he puts his foot down too hard.
I say hold on to Kawhi Leonard. He's big time. You don't find these players every day. We're having discussions when Kawhi Leonard is healthy as him being a top 3 player on the planet. Both ends of the floor, accepting the toughest defensive assignment from open and tap, what he brings to the table.
All that's true, Stephen A. Smith, but there is a very high probability that he has heavily eradicated much of the rapport that he has formerly had with many of his teammates.
He's not only a champion, but an NBA Finals MVP. We can't ignore the greatness that exists in Kawhi Leonard. What I will say to you is this. When you look at Boston and the assets, when you look at Philadelphia and assets, when you look at the Los Angeles Lakers and potential assets, there's certainly, it gives you cause to pause, and you might need to look at that if you're the San Antonio Spurs. But what I'm saying is the system, the coach, and the player that has already proven he can win in that system with that coach is something you hold on to for dear life and you don't let go of unless you absolutely positively have to.
Stephen A. Smith, do you understand how much work is going to have to go into rebuilding the relationships between Kawhi and that franchise in the offseason if they decide that they want to keep him? Greg Popovich is going to be coming off of the death of his wife, and he may still have some rancor, some ill will towards Kawhi that he feels like was unjust and undue, because he may feel as if he treated Kawhi better than most other coaches would have treated him. First off, let's establish that Greg Popovich is a liberal Caucasian, or at least acts like he is. So he's dealing with the quote-unquote white man's burden syndrome of, Negro, I treated you so well and you do me like this. All of those hurdles, both he and Kawhi are going to have to go over, transverse, whatever term you want to use, in order for them to build back their relationship. And I just don't see that happening, bro. I think that they're going to be pursuing a possible trade for Kawhi after a potential exit interview with him, because that's what it's going to be. They may act as if they're speaking to him to pick his brain and see if he still wants to stay, but I think that plan A will be to trade him, because the Spurs are 90% mental, 10% physical. And if they feel like you're not mentally invested in their team and in the overall quote-unquote culture, they want you out of there. You see what happened with LaMarcus Aldridge. He was ready to get out of that sunken place known as the San Antonio Spurs franchise/system. And Popovich talked him out of it because he realized he couldn't get anything back for him that would be commensurate. In the case of Kawhi, I can see multiple franchises that would be willing to give the Spurs back commensurate compensation, particularly the Boston Celtics, maybe even the LA Lakers. The Lakers are so forward heavy, I could see them making a big trade, or at least attempting to make a big trade with San Antonio for Kawhi.
That's what I would do if I were Greg Popovich. Now, if it's this summer, no. Why? Because Kawhi's only played 9 games. He's been hurt. There's some questions as to what his value would be because you haven't seen him and you don't know how serious this injury is. You know.
That's why I thought he was going to try to come back at the end of the season. That's the exact reason why I thought that he would try to come back before the end of the season, so that he could prove not only to the Spurs but to other teams that I'm back. I have not lost anything. And when you sign me to that Supermax or trade me and I can sign somewhere else, I'm going to be worth every penny. I don't want you to doubt that I have fully rehabilitated myself. So it's very clear to me that the reason why he has decided to not come back is that he has been so turned off by the San Antonio Spurs franchise and their hijinks. I don't think that it's just a physical issue where his leg is not fully healed. I think it also has to do with the fact that he's tired of the attempts at manipulation. And I had a brother in the comment tell me that he heard a story, or he read a story somewhere, that one of the reasons why Kawhi Leonard is tired of Greg Popovich is because Popovich keeps giving him a hard time about him being a supporter of Donald Trump. That's according to the brother in the comment. I have not been able to find an article that substantiated that comment. So if the brother's listening, please provide a link. I searched for that storyline. I did not see it.
You know it's serious enough that he only played in 9 games. You know it's serious enough that, he's been ailing and he refuses to come back. But in the same breath, you still don't know what's it going to be like. You want him to come back and establish his value first.
Exactly.
And while he's back and establishing his value and he's on the court for you, that's an opportunity for you to cultivate the relationship and to gauge whether it's best or not to hold on to him, which Popovich is more than qualified to do at that particular moment in time. But what you don't do is react off of what has transpired this season, this summer. Because by doing so, you minimize his value and the return, therefore, on that investment, because Kawhi has been out and people are going to say, we don't know what he is. We don't know what he could be because we don't know how serious this injury is. He's been out all year long, and they might cut short of giving you what he may be worth.
Well, they may try to cut short, Stephen A., but that's why you can always say no. Let me say this. I think that it may be too much work to build back up the relationship between Kawhi and the entire franchise from the head coach on down, rebuild that rapport, go into the season, have him as an engrafted part of that franchise, of that team, just to showcase him, to trade him later on. I don't think that they're going to go through all that. I think that they're either going to trade him in the offseason or they're going to try to keep him.
2 things. One, to respond to your, hey, it's 2018, figure out a way to reach him. I'm not just talking about getting the physical message to him. So his ears hear the sound vibrations coming out of Popovich's mouth or the text, I'm talking about so Kawhi receives it. Popovich feels, it seems to me, that he can't get through to him. He's getting through to him through the media.
No, it's not that he can't get through to him per se. Kawhi is understanding what he's saying. He just is not going to conform to it, Max Kellerman. And you'll see this oftentimes with liberal Caucasians. They feel like if you disagree with them, it's because you don't comprehend what they're saying, because they always assume that they're on the right side. They always believe that they're in the right. And they cannot comprehend any situation or scenario where they're trying to outline something, especially to a Negro, a so-called black person, and that so-called black person doesn't agree, and it not being a comprehension issue. They believe that if you don't understand or agree with them, it's because you don't comprehend it, not that you just happen to not be a conformist. You're not going to submit to their will. So that is why he decided to utilize the peer pressure tactic, which is unfortunate because I believe that it's led to the total dissolution of any form of relationship between Kawhi and that team.
You're saying that's the best way for him to get through to him publicly.
But that goes, if someone's running interference, if there's a barrier between a coach and the player, or a GM and the player, if it's an uncle or whoever it is, then that barrier can, one, make it more difficult for face-to-face meetings, period, or for messages to get through, but also harder for the person to receive it. So he's bypassing that and using the media. That tells me there's a problem in the relationship. Now,
no, what that tells me is that Kawhi Leonard is a man and he's ready to make his own decisions. And he does not need anyone to tell him what is best for him. He knows what's best for him. We already know what the company line is always going to be with many of these franchises. We drafted you. We raised you. We know what's best for you. This is home. No, it's not home. Home is where your family is. Home is where the people that truly love you are. Popovich does not love him. Popovich needs him. It's a major difference.
Now, Stephen A., as far as what they can receive in return is concerned, I would agree with you if the packages they're getting for Kawhi are subpar. Yes, sure. But what I mean in my position is that Kawhi, I'm not taking anything away from Kawhi, or maybe I am. The same way I don't think I'm taking anything away from Brady. Tom Brady is the GOAT because he is with Bill Belichick. Tom Brady was going to be a great quarterback no matter where he went.
Not necessarily. not being drafted in the 6th round. If he would have been drafted by a different team in the 6th round, he may never have seen the light of day. The reason why he's been allowed to rise to prominence, number one, he has a background where they knew that he was going to be a special quarterback. Tom Brady is a monarch athlete, but that's a whole other issue. That's a whole other topic for another day. He adheres to concepts like transcendental meditation. I'll probably be covering that in another video. And as we know, his quote-unquote wife is a Luciferian. I did a video on her. And Belichick is an MK handler. But there comes a time where the subject likes to break away from the handler. We're seeing it with Kawhi and Greg Popovich. We're also seeing it in New England with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. But no, Tom could not have just gone anywhere and been as successful as he's become. I don't think that there's any quarterback that could have just went anywhere and become successful. I think that the system heavily correlates with the success of the quarterback. But of course, talent shines through. But, there's a difference between throwing for 3,500 yards for one team and then you go to another team and you throw for 5,000 yards. Look at Drew Brees.
Would not be considered the greatest of all time were it not for Bill Belichick.
Okay.
Kawhi Leonard was going to be a great NBA player, no matter who he was with. But I don't think he would have risen, at least in my eyes, to the second best player in the world when healthy without Greg Popovich. Popovich not only knows how to develop, how to identify talent. I'm not saying he's perfect, but he's better at it than most. Then he knows how to develop it, the Spurs staff with Popovich at the top. So, in a package you get from Kawhi, they are more likely than others to identify the right talent and then to develop it into something special. I don't think Popovich needs Kawhi in order for the Spurs to continue being the Spurs.
I disagree.
He is going to have to get a real package back for him, but he doesn't need that particular player.
But again, then you need Kawhi, because you need Kawhi to get the real package. See, because as presently constructed, you don't have it. And that's what the situation is. When I look at the San Antonio Spurs right now, again, it's not inside information or anything like that. I'm looking at what I'm watching. I watch a team covering this sport, looking at this team for years. I'm looking at a team that just seems depressed. It's like foreign territory for them. They've lost. It's one thing. Listen, they've had injuries before. They've lost a player or two before where you got to go out there and soldier on without them. But that player is usually on the bench. He's usually rooting guys on. He's usually there. He's a part of the team. He wants to be there, etc. These guys look like a team that feels deserted. And that is the kind of stuff that you got to be careful about if you are Kawhi Leonard.
Well, you pretty much made my point for me, Mr. Stephen A. Smith. That's the point that I've been making throughout this video. I don't think that they're going to be able to repair their relationship. I don't think that Kawhi Leonard is going to be emotionally invested in repairing their relationship. I just don't think that that's where his mind is at. I think that his mind is at making sure that he optimizes his situation, whatever that is. His earning situation, his playing situation. He knows that wherever he goes, he's going to be considered the alpha. And if he has to step on toes to make sure that people understand that he's not going to allow himself to be minimized, that's what he's going to do. And he's not concerned with repairing breaches. Kawhi is the type of person that walk in the locker room, not say anything to anybody, put his shit in his locker, head out to the practice floor, dominate everybody on the floor, go take a shower and go home and not say bye to anybody. And they can't do shit about it because he's the best player on the team. That's what's the most frustrating. People who are conformists are always frustrated by people who are not, because oftentimes people who don't conform, it's very difficult to manipulate them and it's very hard to read them. When you cannot read somebody's mind, you cannot predict what they're going to do. When you can't predict what they're going to do, you cannot manipulate them.
And the San Antonio Spurs, because if you're San Antonio, not only do you have a guy that's played just 9 games and you don't know how healthy he is if you're trying to move him, but you also have to take into account that the San Antonio Spurs, whether intentionally or not, have given off the impression that they feel deserted. And if you are another team, you're looking at Kawhi Leonard, that matters. I understand that he's a superstar and you're going to take him anyway. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to imply that. What I'm saying to you is that that plays a role when you're trying to trade for him. When he's a free agent, no, Max. Nobody's thinking about that because he's just giving the money. Okay, that's fine. But when you're trading, when you're giving away assets to get somebody, those things are factored into the equation, and that cannot be ignored.
No, I get what you're saying from the trade perspective, but as far as the other stuff, it appears to be better if they parted ways at this point.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Miss Molly Karam. And I also agree with you with your assertion that the reason why Greg Popovich is communicating with him via the media has nothing to do with an inability to reach him physically. It has to do with the fact that he's upset that Kawhi Leonard will not allow himself to be dictated to. He will not allow himself to be controlled mentally. And as I stated earlier in the video, this is a tactic that will oftentimes be utilized by the liberal Caucasian when they're trying to remote control the average so-called Negro. They believe that when a so-called black person disagrees with them, it's because of a listening comprehension issue. And don't get me wrong, there are brothers out there that have listening comprehension issues. There's no doubt about that. But when the liberal Caucasian tries to utilize that machination, it's normally due to their white man's burden mentality. They believe that they know what's best for everybody. But anyway, we'll see what happens with Mr. Kawhi Leonard. I'm sure that this will be a very eventful offseason for him. Peace.